it's the case that was in our trainer manual. And just before I take you through this case, I want to remind you of the ethical decision-making model. And I want to remind you about the universal values. And of course, I'll remind you about the NADAC principles. So if you remember, the White and Popovich model advocates for 5 considerations you should make to ensure that you're making an ethical decision. The first point is whose interests are involved, who can be harmed. And you have to reflect about the different people, the potential people that can be harmed, whether it's the client, whether it's the client family, whether it's the service provider as the counselor, whether it's the program, whether it's the field of SUD, or even the community and the general public. Remember to keep that in mind. And when you think about the level of harm, remember it can be, minimal, it can be moderate, it can also be significant. So when you think about that, you make sure you remember to consider the level of impact or harm. The second consideration is who are the primary stakeholders that are involved and how are they affected? Again, evaluate all the different stakeholders, just like I have mentioned, from clients to family, etc. How can they be harmed? Think again about the impact. In the third consideration, ask yourself whose interests, if any, are in conflict. So is there a conflict? If there is a conflict, whose interest? Is it the client? Is it the counselor? Is it the family of the client? Is it the program? Is it the SUD field? Is it the general community or public? And number 4, ask yourself, what universal values can you apply? For example, when you're dealing with stakeholder involvement, what are some of the values that are relevant to that situation? And I'm going to be reminding you what those universal values are shortly. And number 5, what laws, standards, policies, historical practices, or cultural teachings could guide you in the situation? And remember, we said that White and Popovich extended model separates the laws from the standards, from the policies, historical practices, and cultural teachings. For example, when you talk about standards, it could be the ethical standards, like the NADAC principles or the NADAC standards. So consider that. When we talk about the policies, it could be the program policies. It may be the, if you have a sponsor in that program, it could be the sponsor interests. So all this you think about. Finally, let's look at the universal values. Remember what they are. We talked about autonomy. We talked about, which is the need to promote personal identity, obedience. You know what that means. Conscientious refusal, which is where you disobey a directive that's illegal or unethical. Beneficence is about helping others and doing the best good. Gratitude is about giving back or appreciation. Competence has to do with our skills and knowledge. Justice to do with fairness. Stewardship, how we use resources wisely. Honesty and candor, we know that is telling the truth. Fidelity, keeping promises. Loyalty, not abandoning. Non-malfeasance, not causing harm. Discretion is respecting confidentiality and privacy when we divulge information. Diligence is working hard. Self-improvement is being the best you can. Restitution, making amends. And self-interest is about protecting yourself. Those are the 17 values. And finally, remind you the principles of NADAC. Principle 1 was a counseling relationship. Principle 2, confidentiality and privileged communication. Principle 3, professional responsibilities and workplace standards. Principle 4, working in a culturally diverse world. 5, assessment, evaluation, and interpretation. 6, e-therapy, e-supervision and social media. 7, supervision and consultation. 8, resolving ethical concerns. And finally, 9, is research and publication. So I would like you to keep that in mind as we now review the case of Zaina. So I'm going to take you through this case, and I'm going to ask you as we read it to pick what are some of the ethical decision model aspects you can think about. I'm also going to ask you to think about the values that should come into play, and I also want you to think about what principle and probably what standards of that principle are touching on this case. So the counselor is called Zaina. She is an SUD counselor at an outpatient treatment program where she has worked for more than 5 years. She's a skilled counselor who connects well with her clients. In fact, many of her clients have commented that they would like to have her as a friend. However, Zaina knows how to set boundaries with clients, so she does not allow this to happen. Zaina is also an enthusiastic reader and for many years has been a regular customer at her community's bookstore. Over the years, she has become quite friendly with Sharifa, one of the store's owners. In fact, Sharifa would often call Zaina when certain books arrived in which she thought Zaina would be interested. Additionally, Zaina knows Sharifa's husband because he's a mechanic at the service station where Zaina's husband takes their cars for repair. Both families have children in the local primary school. Sharifa was also aware of Zaina's work as an SUD counselor and often joked, "If I ever need counseling, you're the one I would talk to first." Meanwhile, Sharifa was developing a drug problem. Unknown to Zaina, Sharifa was becoming heavily involved in cocaine use and was spending the profits from the bookstore to buy her drugs. Her business partner, Marion, became aware of Sharifa's growing problem and was quite concerned about the effect this could have on their business. Knowing the good relationship Sharifa had with Zaina, she called her for advice. Zaina agreed to facilitate an intervention at which Marion and some of Sharifa's family members confronted Sharifa about her problem. The intervention was a success because Sharifa agreed to go into treatment. However, Sharifa said she would only go into treatment if she could go to the program in which Zaina worked and have Zaina as a counselor. Zaina agreed. Sharifa completed the treatment process with Zaina as her counselor and continued her partnership with Marion at the bookstore. She fully expected Zaina to continue as a regular customer. Please use the ethical decision-making model while discussing this case to answer the following 4 questions. And I also want you to use the universal values, and I also want you to use the NAIDAC principles. So you're going to be saying what principle applies, maybe what standards of the principle, what universal values could be applied, and then we make a judgment on Zaina. So question 1 asks, should Zaina have conducted the intervention for Sharifa? And secondly, should Zaina have served as Sharifa's counselor? 3, should Zaina continue to purchase her books at Sharifa's bookstore? And 4, should Zaina continue to be Sharifa's friend? So now I open the floor to our discussion. Let's begin with question number 1. Should Zaina have conducted the intervention? Remember, the intervention was where Zaina went to help the family and the friend to get Sharifa to accept to go into treatment. So that was the first contact in terms of conducting the intervention. The second one was becoming the counselor, and so on and so forth. So any comments, any hands raised, Jessica?
None yet, but I will keep looking. Oh, Fatima would like to answer.
Yes, Fatima, please give us an answer to question number 1.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Well, I think for Zaina to have conducted intervention for Sharifa is not really bad because Sharifa had known Zaina for a very long time. And I think as at that moment, they found Sharifa very handy, you know, since they knew her as a counselor. Although if Sharifa continue, this may lead to some kind of dual relationship, but for the purpose of this intervention, at least to allow for, at least for Sharifa to agree to go for treatment, Zaina intervening at that point, I think it's okay. Thank you.
So thank you for that comment. And I want you to tell us what universal value you think applies to that answer or to that situation. Yes?
I think it is beneficence. Sharifa, Zaina is trying to do good, you know, for someone whom she knows. So that is one of the universal values.
So you think beneficence? Okay, very good. Yeah. Now, what about, I want to take you down to the ethical decision-making model. So let's think about this. whose interests are involved?
Very good.
And
I think
yes, we can have someone else give their opinion. Is there another hand?
Okay.
Jessica? If there isn't, we will allow Fatima to go ahead. Is there another hand?
I do not see another hand.
Okay, please go ahead, Fatima.
Yes, I think talking about whose interests are involved here, the Sharifa's interest is the first interest that is involved because she is the one involved in the cocaine use. And secondly, our family's interests too are involved here.
Okay.
You know, our family, we want her to be okay. Not the community, the community's interests and the public safety. These are the interests that are involved here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. I see that Lamis has a contribution on the chat, and Lamis says that Zaina should have rather facilitated an intervention with another counselor and asked a colleague to assist. So what are your thoughts about that? Do we think that Zaina caused harm by intervening? Do we think like Lamis that instead of intervening, she should have facilitated with another counselor to assist? Let's have more contributions or thoughts. Any other raised hand, Jessica?
Not right now, but I'm scrolling through again.
Okay.
I see Fatima's hand again. Oh, also Samuel's.
Okay, so let's hear from Samuel. And yes, Samuel. Samuel, please unmute yourself.
Okay, I said good evening, Jessica, Beatrice, Fatima, and others.
Thank
All
you.
right. My thoughts about it is please about the principle. I think her best to do, and then when we look at under principle 1, although we see that there is actually a dual relationship, sometimes we find some of these clients they really want to be able to open up, and then they may be selective. Looking at principle 1, even just the first standard, all right, so that says that it is the responsibility of the addiction professional to safeguard the integrity of the counselor. So long as she can be able to safeguard the relationship, I think it's a way forward. I don't have much to say about at least for that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Now, if we look at the story, we are told that Sharifa said she would only go into treatment if she could go to the program in which Zaina worked and have Zaina as her counselor. So do we think that there was an option? So what was at stake? Supposing Zaina said no to that request, what would have been the outcome?
Can I go on?
Yes, you can.
If Zaina said no, Sharifa would have been demoralized. You know, she may not have so much interest, you know, in wanting to pay for treatment. But for Zaina, at least to intervene in the beginning, such that it's Sharifa to want to agree to go into treatment is a plus, you know, for Zaina. So I think what Zaina did was okay in intervening.
Okay, so for the initial intervention, you think Sharifa, Zaina was ethically right in facilitating intervention for Sharifa?
Yes, because she took the client's welfare into consideration. Under the counseling relationship, you say addiction professional must put their client's welfare, you know, into practice, such that the client's welfare is their concern. So Zaina was concerned for Sharifa. That was why she intervened.
Okay, thank you for that. And if we look at the ethical decision model, we can see it asks whose interests are involved, who can be harmed. So if, for example, the counselor Zaina did not take up that responsibility, could someone have been harmed? Who was going to be harmed?
The clients would have been harmed.
Yes, can we have? Yes, I can see Samuel. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Fatima,
Okay,
Samuel, do you also think the same?
okay, yes, it's actually in the same direction, but the thing about it is that it's just a risk that she actually is going to likely break down and she may refuse any other therapist, you
Mhm.
know. So it actually for me it's actually okay that actually she begins the intervention, but subsequently makes a referral as accordingly. My thoughts.
Okay, so thank you for that. So client welfare, which is standard number one of principle number one of counseling relationship. Let's look at the universal values that applied. I think Fatima talked about beneficence. Is there any other here that you think applied to this case of Zaina? Any other?
I still
Oh,
see Samuel's hand, but that's the
yes,
only
Samuel.
one.
Yes, and I would encourage everyone else to participate. Thank you, Samuel.
Oh, also Fatima's hand.
Okay, Samuel, go ahead. Then Fatima, what value? Fatima
No
said
comment from
beneficence.
someone for now.
Okay, okay. So there's beneficence here because we see that Zaina was good. Yes, yes, Fatima.
Yes, I can see non-maleficence don't hurt anyone. So by
Mm-hmm.
that action of Zaina, she is trying not to hurt anyone. She doesn't want Sharifa to be hurt, and the family, they will not be hurt too.
Okay, maybe she needed to check whether there was another counselor that could have agreed or that she could have introduced the client to agree. But then again, we also know in the initial interventions, particularly to allow someone to get someone to get into treatment, the initial treatment motivation is usually very low, and therefore, perhaps by making that decision to participate, that may have been an ethical decision. Let's think about the second question. The second question is asking, should Zaina have, now, here is the point. The client has gotten into treatment, the initial intervention, but we see that Zaina continues to be now the client of, the counselor of Sharifa. So do you think that that was also an ethical decision? Now that's step number two. Step number one was getting them into treatment. And we have said perhaps if they didn't get her into treatment, maybe she'd never have gotten help. So in the spirit of beneficence and client welfare, maybe it was ethical that Zaina intervened. What about when they got into the treatment center, now agreeing to serve as the counselor of Sharifa, who was her friend and customer at the bookstore, and whose husband was also, let's say, a friend of the husband to Zaina. And both of them had children in the same school. So do you think that was ethical? Yes, let's have more contributions, please. Yes. Do you think she should have served as a counselor now? Yes, Samuel? Samuel?
Hello, am I on?
Yes, you are.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to search which one, but for me personally, it's okay that she actually takes up the case initially, but I think she should actually get to talk with her supervisor and then she makes the appropriate referral accordingly. I was just trying to search it. I know Professor Moses talked about it. I'm trying to search it. When I find it, I'll get across to you. The
So she
principle.
needed to talk to her counselor and do what?
Possibility of making referral for some other therapist to continue with the case.
So she probably could have talked to a supervisor, very important to consult about it. She could also have discussed with the Sharifa the possibility of working with another counselor. Thank you very much. Another consideration that she could have done or made? Yes, what did the principle on counseling relationship tell us we should do when we are faced with dual relationships? Do you remember that?
please?
Yes, please.
Can I go on?
Yes.
In principle 11, it talks of multiple dual relationship. I think when as just like Samuel said, Sharifa should be referred to another counselor. But in doing that, Zana, as the addiction professional, should he said when a dual relationship is unavoidable, shall take extra care so that the professional judgment is not impaired, and there is no risk of client exploitation. So I'm thinking that this is a dual relationship. The Zaina should refer Sharifa, but she will allow Sharifa to know that she's referring her to another professional because of their closeness, because of their relationship.
Supposing, thank you. Thank you for reading for us Standard 11. That is actually Standard 11. And you can see that the case of Zaina might just be more than just two relationships. It's probably multiple relationships because we have been friends, like customer at the bookstore, some customer relationship in the garage, some relationship at the school. So you can see there are multiple relationships. And the question is, supposing Zaina tried to refer Sharifa to another counselor and she declined, what would Zaina do?
Can I answer that, please?
If there is nobody else up, is the rest of the class with us? Let me check. Is the rest of the class with us? Let me see if anybody is chatting.
I do see a chat from Lamise.
Bola. Can Bola speak? Titi's raised hand. Jessica?
I don't see TT's hand raised.
Okay, I've seen Bola.
Oh, okay.
I can do.
So we have Bola and then we have Titi. So Bola, I see you have posted a comment. Would you like to speak it out?
Yes, but I can't unmute myself.
Oh, you can't unmute yourself. Jessica, please try.
Yes, I can unmute myself.
Strange.
Let Jessica try and help. But we can hear you, by the way.
Wait,
so you're fine. You're unmuted.
Oh, you can hear me?
Yes, that's why we can hear you. Please go ahead.
What I see there is the context may matter. If there is low risk of exploitation, because we need to consider even within the multiple relationships that she has with Sharifa, could there be risk of exploitation? If the risk of exploitation is low, then that might be one factor to consider. The other factor to consider is the availability of resources when we talk about stewardship. If the resources are not that available, that it is Zainab that is only the resource person within that context and with low risk of exploitation, and for the fact that it is mentioned that Zainab knows how to draw boundaries in her own personality trait, then there might be ethical for her to go ahead. But if the risk of exploitation is high and there are available resources that she needs to use by referring Sharifa, and he has also the resource of what we have done before, motivational interview. The thing is to work with her in a relationship to get her to be motivated, because she is motivated to have treatment. It's only that she is defining what kind of treatment with the person she wants. So the risks of, if we are able to know what will increase our confidence to start treatment in another place, then that might be used for her to get into into that place and avoiding the risk of exploitation. So those are the things that run through my mind in this particular case. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that input. So you want to find out, is there another alternative? Maybe Zaina is the only game in town, so there's nobody else to refer the client to, maybe. Or maybe and Michael is saying, is there the risk of exploitation? And he thinks if there is no risk or low risk, then it is okay for Zaina to go ahead. Now, I have a question for you and for all of you. Now, do you think the fact that there were all these multiple relationships prior to their engagement, there would be a risk of contamination of the counseling relationship? And how would Zaina handle that? Or what should Zaina do to still remain ethical? Anybody whose hand is raised? There was, who was there? Jessica?
I see Samuel's hand again.
Okay, Samuel? Samuel, please go ahead.
No, no, I'm not ready yet.
Okay, never mind.
I'm ready.
Must have still been up from before.
Okay, Fatima,
Yes.
go ahead.
Yes. I think that if there is nothing, there was nothing Zaina could do than to accept Sharifa's relationship as a client. She has no choice than to go ahead, just like the former speaker said. As long as there is no exploitation, as long as the boundary is set, as long as there is consent, you know. So I think that Zaina can continue with the relationship if there is no any alternative, as long as she can set the boundary, you know. But she should stop doing business or going to their bookshop, you know. She should
So you
stop
have
doing
answered
business.
question 3.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Yes.
Okay. So she she should stop, you know, any kind of business relationship. Now their relationship between Zaina and Sharifa is strictly client counselor relationship. So a clear boundary should be set, you know, with the relationship, such that one will not contradict the other. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, question 4. Should Zaina continue to be Sharifa's
sorry, can I
client?
say something?
Yes, who's speaking? Is it Michael?
It's Bola that is speaking.
Yes, Bola.
Yes, I'm also drawing on the fact that the counselor knows how to draw boundaries, and in that relationship, what she might do if there are limited resources is to discuss these issues with Zainab, because in so doing, they would be constituting new boundaries, which both of them need to agree on, and that will be the informed choice of Sharifa. And that if such, if the agreement is now broken, then what would happen? Would there be a transfer of services to another person and things like that? So I think
Thank you.
that is what they should do. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I want you to respond to the final question. You can combine 3 and 4. Should Zaina continue to purchase books at Sharifa's bookstore? Should she continue to be Sharifa's friend now that they've completed the counseling sessions? Yes, I want a quick comment on that before we finish.
I see that Grace's hand is raised now.
Yes, Grace?
Samuel too.
Yes, Grace, go ahead.
Okay, can I continue while she's on?
Yes, please do.
Okay, I just want to make a comment about the second point. Sorry, I've been in practice for a while, so at least I'm speaking a lot from experience. Now, if we say that Zainab should discuss with the counselor, a lot of times the client, Zainab, is likely, the client is likely going to decline any form of treatment if the counselor discusses anything about not handling the case. So I think this is where competence comes in. So I'm just trying to just attend to the first question, so that that's my opinion on that. Then the question
now, I want you to respond to the third and fourth. Yes, the third and
whether
fourth.
to continue. Certainly, she should find a way of disengaging from patronizing the shop of Sharifa. All right, and the last question is, should Zainab continue to be her friend? Certainly, it's going to be a dual relationship, so it's going to conflict with principle 1 of dual relationship. My humble thoughts.
Thank you. So here is a situation where the counselor has multiple relationships with the client, and the client insists they must only be seen by that counselor. We said in the spirit of beneficence, the counselor may proceed to assist this client. However, there are many risks posed by the multiple relationships, including blurred relationships and boundaries. And therefore, if this counselor must take in this client, the counselor has an obligation to discuss with the client the impact of them becoming their counselor, that they will probably have to lose on the other relationships that they've been having, because they cannot continue to keep the two relationships once they establish the counseling relationship. So we appreciate that in some situations, we will have to take on clients whom we have other relationships, but we have to define boundaries of these relationships. So in the case of Zaina, in the best interest of the client, she took them in. It worked well, but if she continues to continue with the other relationships now, there'll be a lot of contamination of boundaries. And therefore, in some circumstances, we'll have to behave like Zaina, have to take in clients whom we have other relationships with, but then we have got to disengage in terms of these other relationships after we engage with the client within a counseling relationship. And if the counselor has that discussion with the client early enough, the client may actually agree to be referred to another counselor so that they can keep those other relationships with Zaina. And it is likely that if that had been done, the client may have accepted to see another counselor and remain with Zaina as her friend and as her customer at the bookstore. But you can now see that things are not as easy and straightforward when we come to ethical decision making. So thank you very much. I wish to hand it over to my colleague from here. Sorry, I have taken 3 extra minutes. I apologize. And I hand it over to, I'm not sure whether it's Moses or Moreko. I think it's Moses. Moses? Moses?
Yes,
Is it Moses?
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here.
Please take it up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Beatrice, for that setting with that foundation for us discussion. To one of the cases, I read last time, so that we can share. We can. Is my slide? Is my slide visible, please?
They're still loading. They're still loading, but hopefully they come up in a minute. Oh, I can see them now.
Okay. So can everyone see my slide now?
I can.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. We'll go back to this case study. I read it last time, and then we'll continue in the same format, that Beatrice, set up for us. Set the ball. We'll continue in that vein. Here, we're going to talk about professional responsibilities and workplace. We will still go back and look at the ethical principles, so on and so forth, and continue that way. Let me read the case study, then we discuss it. You are a counselor in an outpatient substance use disorder program. You are aware of your ethical obligation and professional conduct as a representative of the field of addiction treatment, and understand that this obligation applies to you whether you are in the workplace or out in the community. You have always been careful to set a positive example for the profession through your actions with co-workers, family, friends, and the public at large. You are not in recovery and on occasion may have a glass. However, you never use drugs other than those prescribed by a doctor, and you never drink alcohol in excess. Some of your co-workers are in recovery. You respect and admire your colleagues in recovery, especially given what they have been through and how they have successfully built new lives. You see all staff members, including yourself, as role models for your clients. You are aware that some of your co-workers who are not in recovery do the share of socializing outside of work. You have never attended any of the parties your co-workers have invited, but you have heard that sometimes there has been some excessive drinking at them. You feel this is appropriate for a professional in the field of substance use disorder treatment. But as far as you know, this behavior has been kept private. However, you frequently hear the rumor that one of those who regularly attend these parties, high, becomes very intoxicated at nearly all of them. Until recently, you have never witnessed any of this alleged drinking behavior. As far as you are concerned, you don't listen to rumors and gossip, so you have chosen not to be involved. However, while at a weekday evening dinner with friends at a restaurant, you hear commotion coming from the bar. Looking over at the bar, you see two co-workers who are obviously intoxicated. One of them is hard. You are surprised to see whom he is drinking with, another staff member, Maine. Maine is one of the counselors who have been quite open with clients and staff about being in recovery. You are concerned because they are both talking loudly and acting rudely. This creates a serious dilemma for you because you are unsure of your obligation as a professional and a colleague. You want to say something immediately, but you are not sure what to say if you did approach them. You decide it would be best to wait until you are all back at work. You are very concerned about the reputation of your treatment program if staff members are displaying such behavior in public. But you are also confused over whether or not you have a professional obligation to report this behavior to someone else. Even if you do have an obligation to report, you are not sure whom you would report it. So please use the ethical decision-making model while discussing the case study to answer the following three questions. One, do you have an ethical obligation to report your co-workers off-duty drinking behavior? Two, if you do this behavior. And then three, will this one-time off-duty drinking behavior be considered a violation of the code of ethics? But before we answer questions, I want to go in the same vein, as Beatrice, said the ball rolling. First of all, whose interests are involved here? Or who are the stakeholders in this? In this scenario, who are the stakeholders? Please, I want the participants to tell me who the stakeholders are. And Jessica, let me give you the opportunity to talk. Who are the stakeholders?
Yes, I see that Fatima's hand is raised.
Oh, Fatima again. Okay, thank you. Great. Who are the stakeholders, Fatima?
Yes, the stakeholders here are one, the program itself, two, the other staff members, the board of directors, the funding sources, the professional field, the community, and public safety.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any other thing to say or a contrary opinion, please?
No contrary opinion.
Okay, thank you, Prof. But any other stakeholder that you have mentioned?
The other staff of the program.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
You mentioned the other clients, the users of the program.
Thank you very much. Okay. Are there any interest in conflict here? Or interests are in conflict here? we see any conflict of interest here or any conflicting interest here?
I see Fatima's hand again.
Okay, Fatima. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I think there is conflict between the members of staff and the organization or the program.
Please, can you explain further?
Yes, like now these people are now using alcohol and they are behaving rudely in public. So anyone knows that since it's a community, they know that they work in a treatment center where people who use alcohol are being treated. But now they are exhibiting such behavior in public. Then people will now think that their organization is not serious. So that's why I said that there is conflict of interest between these members of staff that are rude and the organization.
Any contrary opinion or any addition to what she said?
I have an addition.
Okay, please go ahead.
The staff that is trying to decide whether to report these people they're also close to him. So it's in between whether to report them to the management or authorities of the program or keep the secret because they are close to him. That is the conflict of interest that this particular staff is having. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Any other contribution, please, or contrary opinion?
Yes, thank you, sir. This is Higiato.
Okay, please go ahead, Higiato.
Yes, sir. Let me speak on another area of conflict of interest. Now, the people who go to use alcohol and then behave inappropriately, they are also the persons who are supposed to be working in the treatment center. Yes. So they will not have the conscience, the moral basis to be treating people of alcohol use disorder, whereas they themselves have the challenge or the problem. So that in itself is also a conflict of interest.
Thank you, Higeto. Thank you very much. Any other, please?
It looks like TT would like to speak.
Okay, please go ahead, TT. TT, go ahead, please.
Good day, all. I will go with Higeto because from what we said, these people are they are still in recovery and they are counselor as well. So there's a conflict because the supervisor will be looking at, he wouldn't want to hurt them. So for them to, if by the time he reports them as well, they may lose their job and they might get frustrated and relapse totally. So we're looking at what will I do? So I think there's a conflict of interest between these people that they were taking the alcohol and for them to even to report to the management. So
please let's minimize the noise at the background, please.
I wanted to say
please switch off other electronic devices.
Hello?
Yes, please go ahead.
I was talking about the suppliers of the alcohol themselves trying to report it. They now become like a threat to their own business. There could be conflict of interest in that aspect also.
Okay, thank you. Please let's minimize the noise at the background. Please, if you have electronic gadgets or equipment, please switch them off so that we can hear everyone clearly. Thank you very much. So, okay. What universal values are actually involved in this case? Hello? Hello?
Yes. We're here.
So it's intimidating me.
Right.
Okay, Prof, I see beneficence here.
Please explain yourself. What do you mean?
Okay, I'm just trying to see that the universal values of trying to or wanting to help those colleagues of his is actually one value maybe he may actually be considering since he's in a dilemma. He's thinking of what will happen by the time he reports them, what would become of them, and all of that. So possibly he may be looking at it from the point of helping them. That's why I'm looking at beneficial.
Thank you very much. Any other contribution or opinion?
The other one is confidentiality. He's also trying to, this is Dr. Nkwobu Kennedy. He's also trying to keep confidentiality, not to expose his colleague.
Thank you very much. Great. Any other one?
Okay, sorry, sir. If he's considering whether the what off-duty drinking is a violation of code, he is thinking about, should I, if I report them, am I doing them harm or not? So the do no harm aspect may also be considered in terms of the universal code.
Thank you, Prof. I don't think that will behave this way. That's why I'm very much interested in this case. Please, any other?
Yes, sir. I have one, sir.
Okay.
Can I go ahead, sir? Yes. There is discretion. Yes, yes, there is discretion. He decided not to confront them there, that he will wait until they get back to work. So as at that time, he was using his discretion to respect confidence and privacy so that he will not expose them to public ridicule.
Thank you, Fatima. Any other?
I can't hear anything again.
You can't hear what? Oh.
With you, Prof.
We're with you, sir.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Oh. Scenario.
Yes, sir. I have one.
Professional standards, so on and so forth. Fatima. Please go ahead, Fatima.
Can I go on? I have one.
Yes, please go ahead. Thank you.
They have violated the principle of, yes, they have violated the principle of integrity. As addiction professionals, they are supposed to conduct themselves very well in public. So drinking in the public, behaving rudely is a sign of violation of the integrity rule or principle.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the questions and ask them. And the NADAC principles. Is there anyone that's at play here? Which one is involved? Which principles are involved here?
I see a couple of hands that have been raised for a while, but it looks like TT's hand is still raised.
Samuel is on, Jessica.
Okay, Samuel, that works too.
Okay, Prof, I am looking at principle 1 under client welfare. I'm looking at it that although they are colleagues, remember they are actually in recovery. So actually they are still clients to him already. So he needs to look at their welfare. So if he does not actually take the appropriate action, I think it's actually contravening the client welfare. That's standard 1 of principle 1.
Okay. Any other, please? Or contrary opinion? Yes.
I see that Fatima's hand is raised.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, that was the former hand I raised.
Oh, that was from before. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
It's hard to tell on here. And I see a couple of others, but they've also been there for a while, so I don't know if they're wanting to answer this question.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if not, yes.
Okay.
Rest.
Grace and TT's hands are raised, but I think
Question now.
they've been there for a while.
Okay, okay. Titi, go ahead, please. Titi, do you want to talk?
No, I didn't raise my hand.
You have anything to contribute?
I didn't raise my hand.
Okay. If there's no, let's answer the question. Okay, sorry. Okay. Do you have your co-worker off-duty drinking behavior? If they're drinking off-duty, do you have an ethical obligation to report their off-duty drinking behavior? All that we have learned so far. Is there responsibility, ethical obligation to report them?
Can I say something?
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
As long as the behavior does not disturb their work, it's their personal matter. If it affects the work they are doing, then that is when the report becomes obligatory to me.
Can you substantiate that from any of that code of ethics? Is there anything in the other code of ethics that justifies that?
Well, what I can say is that as long as you are a counselor and that you are upholding the standard of not drinking, you are, even off duty, a role model for the program. And so if your behavior off work is such that it could affect the image of the program, then there is an ethical responsibility for that behavior to be reported. That has happened even for students who off campus misbehave, and the school has a responsibility to call them to order. So in this case as well, as long as the image of the program is at stake, an image of other people that use the program, I mean that it could affect other people who use the program who might hear about it, then there is a responsibility for that behavior to be mitigated or prevented. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Because if you say you can drink off duty on class, that's the question now.
I think Raymond would like to speak.
Yes, thank you very much. I want to agree with the previous speaker that I have an obligation to report to these co-workers.
So any other contribution?
Do you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm also saying I agree with the previous speaker that I do have an ethical obligation to report to these co-workers.
Okay.
Even though this behavior has happened off duty. For me here would be that first of all, they engaged in a brawl, in a fight, which reflects poorly on them as counselors, as duty bearers for But I think NADAC rules 3, guidelines 3 would apply in cases. They are not acting responsibly, therefore they can't be advocates, they are not being the right role models, and they are not acting with integrity that this demands. So I would feel responsible for them and I would have to report them. However, if they had come to me and I didn't hear this through rumors, then my responsibility to them would be to keep confidentiality in my care, and I was aware of this, and I'm helping them in one way or another. Then I would be duty bound to, deal with this privately with them. Thank you.
Thank you very much for shedding this light on this. Okay, let's move on. Except if someone else has some contrary opinion. Let's go to question 2. If you do, to whom do you report this behavior? In your own program, to whom will you report behavior? Let's look at all different programs. Who will you report this behavior to?
Can I say something, sir? Yes. If it was in my organization, I will not report them to the overall boss in the first place. I will report them to their immediate supervisor so that they can be cautioned and they can be asked to adjust. But if the situation persists, then they have to be reported to the higher authority.
Okay, Prof. I want to align with Fatima in one way.
Go ahead.
However, instead of reporting to any super or anyone, I would want to take them as clients. I'm reporting them as clients. So I'm believing that they have their own therapists they're working with. I'll begin from there, from their therapist.
Yeah. Hello? Kennedy.
Okay.
I think I will be, yes, this is Kennedy. I will like to give them a chance. I would like to give them a chance.
Go ahead.
And call them, as many as I could call, to advise them. I will just take it as an advice. And if they continue, then I can take a further step to report them to the authority of the program.
Any other contribution opinion, please? Let's go to question 3. Would this one-time off-duty drinking behavior be considered a violation of the code of ethics? I need answer from the participants. Will this one-time off-duty drinking behavior be considered a violation of the code of ethics?
Is this Michael? Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Prof. Okay. Please explain further.
Our integrity should be intact all the time. There is no difference between off-duty and on-duty because it's the same person and is a model and should live above board, both within the center and outside the center.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much. Any other contrary opinion?
Hello,
My
sir.
opinion isn't contrary.
Yes.
I'm sorry, go
Pardon?
ahead.
Go ahead.
All right, I was saying my opinion isn't contrary. This one-time off-duty behavior is actually a violation of code of ethics. I come from a medical background. For us, medical ethics is it's like an epidemic. You only need one to consider it a violation. So The one off is enough.
Very much.
That was it. Thank you.
Hello, Fatima.
Yes, sir. I also agreed with the last speakers because I remember during one of the presentation that Morekwe was giving, I remember she said between personal and professional attitude or something, that when it comes to ethics, there should be no difference between your personal something. I can't remember, but I think she was trying to talk about personal lives and professional lives, that when we are talking of ethics, there is no serious distinction between the two. You cannot claim to be somebody in your private life and claim to be another person when you are a professional. Your attitude as a professional should also be seen in your personal lives. So I think this is a violation of the code of ethics.
Thank you very much. Juncture, I think I will give way to Morocco. Thank you very much. Morocco, please take over.
Thank you, Dr. Moses. Good evening, colleagues. I hope we are all awake because I've been hearing Professor Moses saying, can anybody respond? So this is the last session for our course, and I'm hoping that we continue participating because it's very important for us to learn from each other. So I'm just going to share my slide.
And Marekwe, if you don't mind me interjecting, I'm trying to figure out who's wanting to contribute, but I keep seeing a lot of hands still raised from prior questions, so it's hard to distinguish which people actually want to answer. I don't know if people know how to put their hands down, but if they do, it would be greatly appreciated.
Okay.
Jessica, we don't know how to put our hands down.
You don't know how? Okay, I was trying to figure it out as well, so I could keep up with it, but I'm not sure. But okay, now I know that you don't know how, so I'll do my best to try to distinguish it. Otherwise,
No, I think they could just click the raise hand again. It will lower the hand.
Yeah. So are we able? Okay, thank you for that clarification. Somebody's mic is on, and so I'm just gonna kindly ask if they switch off the mic.
I'll try to find it.
Yes. Are we able to see the case study?
Yes, I can see it.
Jessica, are you able? Okay.
Yes, I can see it. And
So
also,
we are going
thank you,
to
everyone.
yes. Okay, thank you. So we'll continue with our case studies and answer the questions. We'll go through the ethical decision-making model as we've been doing. So our case reads as such. You are an addiction professional working as an outreach worker at a community drop-in center, which sees a diverse range of clients from the homeless to those experiencing severe substance use disorders and those suffering from HIV/AIDS. Some of your work with the client is done within your office in a structured environment, but frequently you meet over coffee, right, at the center, or even sick clients in the community when concerned about their health and safety. Regardless of where you meet your clients, you always, at least orally, assure them that everything they share with you will be kept confidential. That assurance has allowed you to build trust with and assist clients with whom no one else has been successful. Recently, though, there's been 5 deaths in the community caused by people consuming a homemade alcoholic beverage. When you meet Ranjit this week on a little hillside where he and his friends usually hang out, he's very high. Eventually, he tells you that he was feeling really guilty because he knows who sold the chemicals used in the homemade alcohol purchased by the people who died. Right? You ask who it was, and Ranjit names a local small business owner. Ranjit tells you he knows this information because why? He earned a bit of money by helping the owner load the supplies onto his truck before they were delivered. After thanking Ranjit for his honesty, you tell him that you plan to go to the police with that information. Ranjit states you cannot do that because you promised total confidentiality. And he shared that information because you have always honored that commitment. You explained that there is an exception to confidentiality when lives are endangered. But Ranjit says you never told him that. You have never had Ranjit sign a release of information form or any other kind of confidentiality document. So this is our story about Ranjit and the counselor who was working as an outreach counselor within the community. So we are going to use the ethical decision-making model. But before we do that, I wanted someone to actually state which NADEC ethical principle actually applies to this case.
And the principle of documentation. Right, this Michael.
It's a standard within which principle. Remember, there are 9 principles, and within the principles, right, there are standards. I do agree that there might be a standard that applies with documentation, that there was never been documentation in terms of confidentiality. But documentation, which principle does it fall under? It's a standard within a principle. Remember the principles that Beatrice read, right? Can I remind you of the principles? Counseling relationship, right? Confidentiality and privileged communication. Professional and workplace standards, working in culturally diverse world, assessment, evaluation, and interpretation, e-therapy, supervision, resolving ethical concerns, and research and publication. So, Michael, you are not far off, but which principle does that standard fall under?
Confidentiality and privileged communication.
Thank you. Yes, it does fall under confidentiality and privileged communication. Thank you for that. We will revisit that. Let's go to the ethical decision making model. The first question, as always, whose interests are involved? Who can be harmed? We have a list here from that model that we can pick from, but you can also use that the information from the case to determine whose interests are involved in this case. Who can be harmed? If you want to comment, just go ahead, because I'm not able to see the comments or on the chat.
Okay, Titi.
Yes.
Can I go ahead?
Yes.
The interest of the community.
The community, for sure. Is it significant, moderate, or minimal?
Significant.
Very significant. Already 5 people have already died, right?
Yes. Very significant for me.
Yes. Whose interests are also involved here?
Public safety.
Public safety, yes. So it's the community, yes.
The public safety is very significant.
Yeah, it's very significant. I do agree with you, Fatima. What about the client? Are the client's Ranjit's interest involved in this case?
Yes.
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 Client and the
interest is involved.
Yeah, I can also hear Professor Rania. You are saying that
the client, Ranjit, and his family member are very involved. He will be if he will be either make chosen between going into the police or staying silent, he will be despairing, and he will be continuing in the drug deals, and he will never appear to the agency anymore.
Yeah, his interests are involved. Yes, no, thank you, Prof. Ranjit also, he is concerned about him leaking out the secret, right? So there is definitely some involvement when it comes to him as well as his family members. What about the counselor? Is the counselor involved? Are there interest involved?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. How? In what way?
The counselor's interest is involved here too, because he has the responsibility to report the matter, although he's breaching the confidentiality he has with his client. But as at this point, when it involves human lives, he has to go ahead and make a report.
No, clearly. The counselor, thank you, Fatima. Definitely, their interest is ensuring that they protect the community, right? And as an addiction professional, clearly they are ethically bound to ensure that they protect the community when there's imminent danger. So, what about the professional field? Is there any interest regarding the professional field?
Yes, no, I think so.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Yes, as addiction professionals, we also think not necessarily just as in terms of our work or where we work or our programs. We always want to also think about the field itself. What is it that we are contributing? How would people view the field? Hearing that you, as a counselor, you know who actually was selling the chemicals that were used, even though you had it from a client, you have the responsibility towards the field to show that as addiction professionals, there is that value that we uphold, right? Which I'm not going to say. I'm going to ask you that question. So, whose interest, if any, right? I have skipped the second one. How may primary stakeholders be involved or harmed? I think it's from the case itself. How do you think the primary stakeholders may be harmed?
Primary stakeholders are the...
Can I say
Anybody?
something?
How? Yes, go ahead, Prof.
I don't
Yes.
understand what stakeholders.
The stakeholders is who is involved. Already we have established the clients, anybody who's a stakeholder in the issue. When we talk about a stakeholder, how would that issue of having an alcoholic beverage kill the community? Who is it? Anybody who has an interest or is affected by that issue, that is the stakeholder.
The counseling profession or the addiction profession
Yeah.
people
Yes.
realize from not only the individual concerned but the profession to bring its integrity to
So no, thank you for highlighting that. You see that the counselor, actually it's the last two sentences, had not done due diligence in making sure that that clients actually are conversant and cognizant of the fact that confidentiality, there are limits to it, and there's no documentation. I'm glad that the first speaker, the speaker said documentation. So there's no documentation or any signed confidentiality clause that they ensured to have in place. So clearly, it's harming the profession, because when it comes down to it, is that as a professional, you know that you are supposed to actually have something written to show that people understand confidentiality. We've actually discussed confidentiality with our clients. So moving right along, whose interest? I know that it's not just the profession. When you think about who can be harmed, obviously the community, right, can be harmed, professional field, the counselor, the client, the family. So people who can be harmed actually also come from this first question that says whose interests are involved. All these people here, the clients family members, SUD counselor, even the program, like if the program, the board of directors, if they were to hear about a counselor who did not ensure that confidentiality is discussed to the extent that it should be discussed, they actually also would be harmed in a way, because they would be seen to not be enforcing or policies within that program, right? So now coming to whose interests are in conflict, because clearly there are interests that are in conflict. Whose interests are in conflict?
Can I go on, please?
Yeah, go ahead, Fatima.
Yes, the counselor himself, his interest is in conflict because now he has not proper homework, through documentation or by informing the client about confidentiality, or when there is a danger or there's a problem, he will divulge some information. So the counselor has there's a conflict now with the counselor because he's in a dilemma of what he's going to do.
Yes, no, thank you. Any other conflict that the counselor might be having? Whose interest, if any? The counselor also, you can think about the counselor. She has always had, or he has always had, this assurance orally, like that he gave to the clients. So you can see that because of that assurance, now the clients think that they are not doing what they have always been assured. So the conflict for the counselor there is probably maybe conflict of oral assurance with the client, and knowing that they have an obligation actually to report when there's imminent danger, right? So you can see that there is a bit of a conflict because Ranjit had to go back and say, but no, you did not tell me about these limits of confidentiality. And obviously she knows that that was not discussed to the extent that it should have been discussed. And then what about Ranjit? Do we see any of his interest being in conflict?
Yes, I think so.
Colleagues, are you? Yes. What about Ranjit? What about the client?
I think there is a conflict too, because the client said that he knew where they are selling this. So he has an obligation to tell where they are selling it, to report the case, or to tell the counselor that this is where the chemical is being.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's okay, but I think so.
Anybody else?
Can I come in? Can I come in, Titi? Titi, can I come in? Okay. I think the conflict of Ranjit is that Ranjit is collecting money from the person. And now, if the counselor go ahead and report to the police, his source of livelihood will be short. So there's a conflict there.
No,
that's my
there's
contribution.
No, thank you, Titi. There was somebody else. But yes, Ranjit's conflict is the fact that, you know what, he told the counselor because he thought the counselor would keep it confidential, right? And he was saying this while high. So there's definitely a conflict for Ranjit because he has been keeping this, and when he was high, he decided to tell the counselor, but he did not expect the counselor to go and report to the police. And as Titi said, he got money from the local person who supplied the chemicals. So there's clearly going to be a conflict when it's out there that Ranjit is the one that actually brought about the news as to what contributed to people's death. Thank you for your contribution. Let's quickly go to the universal values that can be applied in this case. Is the value of autonomy, does it apply? Or maybe somebody can just look at the values and choose the ones that they feel that apply, and tell us why they think those values apply in this case. Anybody? 33 participants.
Yes, please.
You know what? I feel that we are gaining a lot from Fatima, and we are not sharing our experiences. Why do I feel that we are not sharing our own experiences and just gaining a lot from Fatima? But go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I think for the counselor, there is the value of conscientious conscientious refusal, like disobeying something illegal and unethical. So I think on the part of the counselor, we have conscientious refusal.
Okay, tell us, like, in what way is this value applicable? Where are they disobeying illegal and unethical directives?
Yes, I'm thinking that when he since he has the obligation to report the issue, so that means he is doing something. If you report ethical, so that's why I said is that rules applies.
What do others think? Conscientious refusal. There's conscientious refusal, right? Because the word refusal there, and then there's also the value of discretion, about respect of confidence and privacy.
Yeah.
And then there's another value about
Fidelity, please. Yes.
or honesty. Right? So I want to hear what others think about conscientious refusal. Does it apply here?
Yes, yes. And
Okay.
also the autonomy. First one, the autonomy and beneficence. Beneficence. I mean that the only way the counselor can avoid all conflicts is to convince Tanjid to enter into therapy. Once Tanjid is inside therapy, instead of paying time to convince him to go to the police, he can pay time to convince him to go into therapy. And inside the therapy, he will be safe from police, and he will be benefiting the environment or the community by preventing further death. So when we are autonomy, he should teach Tanjid that it's not because that he's diseased and he's an addict, he can destroy the whole community. It is our freedom to choose where to continue into the disease or to go out and to take good decisions. He can transmit his autonomy to the patient. The doing good and helping others with beneficence, that he should tell him how we go into drugs until we cause people death. So if you go into treatment, you will be safe and the community will be safe. And that's why he will be teaching him how to be good and to help others.
So you are seeing more, yes, no, thank you. Beneficence, you are seeing it more from that the counselor, if I may paraphrase, is actually modeling the behavior of honesty to Ranjit, right? So
Yes.
it's doing good. And then the other way to look at beneficence is the fact that now looking at the community which is at danger because of this chemical, the counselor is going to report, right? So it's out of the good of others, that thinking about the good of others, that the counselor actually is reporting to ensure that there's no continued number of deaths in the community, right? So thank you for that. I also appreciate, I didn't think about it in that way, that you could look at autonomy over, like, because it says freedom over one's destiny, to because I'm trying to think more of how that applies in this regard, like, because the case is more about, like, the principle that we're looking at is about confidentiality and privileged information. So let me just think about what you just said about autonomy, and then I'll get back. So thank you for that. And then honesty and candor, telling the truth, that one is very clear. Is there any other value that you see applicable in this scenario?
Yes, justice and non-maleficence.
Yes, justice. Yes, justice, being fair, distribute by merit. How is justice applicable?
That it's not because I'm helping you and I'm keeping your confidentiality that we are allowed to harm the community or to cause further deaths. It doesn't. This is not fair.
So you are being fair to the, yes, you are just not being, okay, you are being fair. Okay, no, thank you for that. Any other Any other value? Non-maleficence don't hurt anybody. I see. Yes.
I'm seeing
I see
self-respect.
self-interest.
Self-interest, sorry. Yeah.
Can I hear you again, Prof? You said what? Prof?
For me, I said self-interest.
Self-interest in what way?
Yes, please. Because in either way, there is a way that he is trying to see how he needs to actually be able to protect himself, and people are looking at the interests for themselves, actually.
Yeah. So the values that are in conflict, Ranjit is looking at himself as compared to the community, right? Yes.
That's correct.
Yes.
I think
Okay.
also the counselor is looking out for himself or herself because they have a duty to report, they have a duty to protect, yet they might not do that because they didn't disclose this information to the client initially. But when they do report, it's out of their own self-interest, or as a counselor, they have done what is ethically right, even though in the beginning they did inform the client about it. So the counselor might also be acting out of self-interest if they do decide to report Ranjit or to disclose whatever they have discussed.
Yeah. No, thank you for that input. It might be the counselor thinking, yes, I have made a mistake. This is out of interest. I have to make sure that I protect myself, the profession, and all that. So, both of in terms of looking at Ranjit and the counselor, it clearly can be the values of self-interest. How do I preserve myself as a counselor, my integrity, and all that, despite the fact that I initially made a mistake? So there might be culture specific values because we don't know which country, which culture Ranjit is from, and we don't want to assume just because it's Ranjit. But you could think about the laws and standards and policies, historical practices, and cultural teachings. If this case was actually in your country, just one person, just to share with us, if it was in your country, just state the country, what laws, standard policies, historical practices could guide you in this situation. The cultural teachings that could guide you if it was in your country.
I'm not sure if it's from before, but TT's hand is raised.
TT, go ahead. So you can think about, because we are running out of time, I want us to go to the questions. Think about the cultural practices. I know in Botswana we have this value called Butu. And Butu means, how in English? You look at the interest of others. So it's one thing that would probably guide the decision in terms of thinking about the greater good of the community. So, and I want to believe, because even, I don't know, Lamirs, I know in South Africa you have Ubuntu, which is almost the same thing, that you always look at the interest of the community and other people who are from South Africa. Probably you understand that. But which I want to believe that in most African countries, you have that concept that you look at the interest of the community most of the time when making decisions. So the question remains, should you report this information to the local police? Should you report this information to the local police? Anybody?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. Tell us why. Share with us why. What is your thinking?
Well, if the client, the Ranjit, can tell whosoever is involved in selling the chemical, okay, I understand now. I think it should be reported to the police. That's what I wanted to say.
Okay,
I think it should be reported because it involves people's lives, you know.
Yeah.
And
So
if he had to, and if he mentioned if Ranjit mentioned the seller of the chemicals, definitely we cannot just go and allow him to go. We have to hand him over to the police for proper investigation. So I think the case should be reported to the police, really.
Yes. Remember, under Principle 3, it's Standard 8, right? Imminent danger. If there is imminent danger to self or others, we are bound ethically to ensure we safeguard the lives of others. So clearly, I'm glad that we are on the same page. Anybody with a different opinion regarding reporting to the police? Okay. The last question is, how
Okay.
might this type... Yes, go ahead, Prof.
Okay, Morocco, I'm just thinking in terms of integrity is actually an important point to bear in mind,
Mm.
apart from just
Mm.
reporting. So integrity is very, very important, still under the same
Mm-hmm.
principle 3.
Mm-hmm. Yes. No, thank you for the addition. Thank you for the addition. So how might this type of situation have been avoided? Where Ranjit is telling the counselor that, no, you know what, I wasn't aware that there are exceptions to confidentiality. How might you have avoided this kind of a situation?
I think the counselor should have engaged Ranjit from the get-go and explain what confidentiality is about, what kind of responsibilities each of them has. But also, he could have had Ranjit sign a confidentiality, document or a consent document, part of which should read that there are exceptions to certain situations.
Thank you. Very, very to the point. Clearly, they did it orally, but we've gone through the 9 principles. It's very clear that documentation is very important. I know in curriculum 5 we've also been taught that if you do not document, it does not exist. For those people that actually go to court, you know that documentation and evidence is the most important thing in terms of what we do in our practice. So clearly, Ranjit was not aware of the limits of confidentiality. He might maybe not have spilled the beans about who was selling the chemical that actually killed people. So is to ensure that when we discuss confidentiality, it's not just orally. There has to be something written where people actually sign, so that even when something happens, you can say, you remember when on this day, and it should be dated. Hopefully you remember, you date, you sign, you make them sign, they date, and there's that information that is stored somewhere, because somebody said documentation, where you can make reference to what you had discussed earlier, so that it doesn't become as a surprise. I can imagine Ranjit being very angry that, you know what, had I known, maybe I wouldn't have. But thank God, there it is. He was high. He said, he told the truth about what is happening in the community. That being said, I hope that we have benefited a lot in terms of understanding NADEC's principle. Yesterday, out of interest, I know that somebody said, are these principles used in our countries? The one thing that we said about the key points about NADEC principles is that they cut across, and they're very cognizant of the fact that we work in diverse communities. Remember, there was that presentation, and therefore we definitely can adapt the ethical principles, but most of what is actually encompassed, you see that it actually relates to some of the ethics code for different professions. So with that being said, I know it's 5 after 8 o'clock. Let me hand over to Jessica, and then let Beatrice and Moses say something if they do have something to share. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for joining us today, everyone. I know that we had a lot of questions that required some participation, and it is Saturday, so I understand if we're all a little tired. But yeah, I think this is the last day of UTC 8, if I'm correct. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, well,
Yes, it is.
congratulations on finishing UTC 8.
Give yourself a pat in the back. You have soared throughout from 1 to 8. You deserve that.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you all have been fantastic, and we really appreciate all of your hard work in the discussion boards and everything like that. And I know that we have our wrap up on Tuesday. I'm not sure if Kim has anything planned for Monday, if Marakwe or Moses or anyone knows.
Yeah, we do have something on Monday and Tuesday.
Okay.
Remember when we started off our training, we did mention that this training is specifically to discuss in terms of how we are going to develop curricula in our different institutions. So we will be sharing on Monday and Tuesday how to develop curricula specific to treatment, whether it's master's or postgraduate diploma. So that will be the focus in terms of Monday and Tuesday. And of course, there will be graduation. So congratulations before we even get there. So clearly, Monday, don't forget, we do have class. I'm not seeing Beatrice here. Moses, do you want to add something?
Morekwe, actually, I'm there.
Okay. I was like, oh
Trying
no,
to
is
look
she
for your
gone?
name here.
It is Moses who is not there because he has stepped out to go to a TV show, which was starting at 1:30. So he sent his apology for leaving early.
Oh, okay.
But he's very glad that the participants have been able to pull through this course successfully.
Yes.
And I join Morekwe and of course Moses in congratulating you all for being able to successfully pull through UTC 1 up to 8. It was a long journey. It was like running a marathon. And believe me, we pulled it together. So thank you to all of you. The course is not over. We have got 2 days to cover the implementation module. So Monday, we shall meet at the same time, and Tuesday, the same time. But we request that on Tuesday, after the class, from 9 o'clock, you give us half an hour for the graduation ceremony. We have been privileged to have the INL representative, Brian Morales, accept to join our graduation. So you don't want to miss that as well. So we're thankful to Kim. We made the request. She made it happen. So between after the time of class, we shall do an extra half hour just for graduation and graduation remarks. So I look forward, and we do look forward, and we are very pleased, all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Jessica, over to you.
Yes. I don't have anything else to add. Are you guys good? Do you have anything more to add? No? Okay.
Oh, say thank you. You've made the training a success. It is because of you that it is a success, actually. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.